Picture a castle so large it has its own weather. Now fill it with silence, not peaceful silence, the other kind, the kind that presses on your eardrums like deep water. Add 600 rooms with the curtains drawn at noon, corridors where the servants walk on the sides of their feet so their heels won't strike the stone, a bell that tolls once every 60 seconds and has been tolling for 9 days, and somewhere above you, behind a door nobody's permitted to open, a small woman in black who has stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and very nearly stopped speaking. That's Windsor Castle, December 1861, the largest inhabited castle on earth, and right now the quietest place in the British Empire. A place where you could freeze your fingers stiff, carrying lead up a staircase in the morning, and stand 10 feet from the most powerful widow in the world by evening. We're going back there tonight. Not as mourners reading the black-bordered newspapers. We're living it. On day. Well, one long, terrible week. One person. Everything he would have seen, smelled, heard, touched, and carried. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them or whether you're all just lying in the dark listening to a 19-year-old boy screw down a coffin lid and thinking, yes, this is relaxing, this is exactly what I needed. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. The first thing you know is that the cloth is wrong. Not wrong to look at. Wrong to touch. You've had your hands in it since 4 o'clock this morning, and your fingertips have gone strange. Dry and squeaking, the way skin gets when it's handled too much black-dyed wool in the cold. Broadcloth takes the dye badly this time of year. It sheds. There is black dust in the creases of your knuckles, black under your nails, a black smear along your jaw where you wiped your face an hour ago. And when you sniff, carefully because your nose is running from the cold, you can smell the dye itself, sour and metallic, like vinegar poured over old iron. Your name is Thomas Wren. You're 19 years old, an apprentice to Messrs. Banting of St. James's Street, London, upholsterers, cabinet makers, and, when the occasion demands it, undertakers to Her Majesty the Queen. You came to London 3 years ago from a village outside Bury St. Edmunds, with a wooden toolbox your father made, a letter from the rector, and one good coat. The occasion has demanded it. Prince Albert is dead, and the whole country, every shop, every church, every railway station, every farmhouse parlour with a cheap engraved portrait over the mantel, is turning black around you, and somebody has to do the actual turning with actual cold hands, and that somebody is you. It is Monday, the 16th of December. He died on Saturday night, a little before 11 o'clock in the Blue Room at Windsor, and by Sunday morning the message had come down the wire, and Mr. Banting had come down the stairs into the workshop in his shirt sleeves, which you have never seen before, holding the telegram like it might catch fire, and said 4 words, "It's Windsor, it's him." Nobody asked him who. Since that moment you have not properly slept. Nobody in the workshop has. You've caught 2 hours here, 3 hours there, face down on a roll of superfine black cloth with your coat over your shoulders, and each time you woke the candles had burned down and someone was hammering, and the work was still there, larger than before. Because grief, it turns out, is a manufacturing problem. Grief has dimensions. Grief has a delivery date. The funeral is set for Monday the 23rd, 1 week, at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, and between now and then an entire chapel must be hung in black, a catafalque must be built, velvet palls must be sewn, and a man must be coffined. Not one coffin. 4. You didn't know that this time last week. That a prince gets 4 coffins, one inside the other like a terrible toy. You know it now. Right now you're on your knees on the workshop floor in St. James's Street, folding 50 yards of black superfine into a packing case, and your knees have stopped hurting because they've stopped feeling anything at all, and Mr. Banting the Younger is standing over you with a list as long as your arm, and outside in the dark street a boy is crying the newspaper, special edition, Death of the Prince Consort, latest particulars, in a voice that cracks on the word death because he's been crying it for 2 days and his throat is gone. And here is the thing you keep coming back to, the thing that sits in your chest like a swallowed stone. 3 weeks ago, you saw him, alive. He came into the shop about a bookcase for Osborne. You held the door. He was pale. Yes, everyone says now that he was pale. Everyone is suddenly an expert on how pale he was. But he stood 4 feet from you, smelling of wet wool and cologne, and he said thank you, to you, for holding a door. 42 years old, dead of typhoid fever, the doctors say. Bad drains, people mutter. The drains at Windsor, the richest family on earth, killed by their own plumbing. Nobody says that part out loud. Not this week. Wren. Mr. Banting the Younger doesn't look up from his list. The cases go to Paddington at 6. You go with them. You stop folding. To Windsor, sir? To Windsor. Mr. Holland's men will meet the goods train. You'll assist with the hangings and... He pauses and something moves across his face that you can't name, and with whatever else is required. You have steady hands. I've watched you. You don't drop things, and you don't faint, and you know when to be silent, which is more than I can say for men twice your age. He finally looks at you. You understand what I'm telling you, whatever else is required. You do understand. Somewhere in that castle there is a body, and bodies do not wait for grief to be ready. Yes, sir, you say. Good lad, eat something. You look like a candle end. And that's it. That's how the biggest week of your life begins, not with a trumpet, with a packing list and a man telling you to eat. You eat standing up because there is nowhere to sit that isn't covered in cloth. Bread and cold mutton from the cook shop 2 doors down, eaten with black-stained fingers, and the mutton fat goes waxy in the cold and coats the roof of your mouth, and you barely taste it anyway because you're doing sums in your head. Not money sums, cloth sums, yardage. The nave of St. George's Chapel is, what did Mr. Holland's letter say? 200 feet and more, and the choir behind it, and every stall and every rail and the whole of the west door to be hung, and the cases you've packed hold perhaps 1/3 of what's wanted, and the rest is coming from every warehouse in London that has black to sell. Because as of this morning there is no black cloth left to buy in the city of London. None. The drapers were stripped by Sunday evening. Ladies' maids were sent out at dawn to fight over a crepe like it was bread in a famine. That's the part the newspapers won't tell you, because the newspapers are too busy printing black borders round their columns, using up their own supplies of mourning rules. The printers are whole fonts of black border exhausted overnight. The part they won't tell you is that a nation doesn't just feel grief. A nation buys grief by the yard, and when 40,000 shops all want it on the same Monday morning, grief runs out. The dye works at Coventry will run day and night for a month. Fortunes will be made this winter by men who happen to own crepe. You know one of the warehousemen, a Norfolk man called Purley with a laugh like a cart on gravel. And this morning Purley wasn't laughing. Purley was standing in an emptied warehouse looking at bare shelves with an expression you couldn't read, and when he saw you he said only, 3 years' stock, Tom, gone since breakfast, and you couldn't tell if it was horror or wonder, and you suspect neither could he. At 5:30 you ride on the tail of the second wagon through streets that are wrong. That's the only word for it. Wrong. London is never quiet. You learned that your first night here 3 years ago, lying awake above the workshop listening to a city that grinds all night like a millstone. But tonight the grinding is muffled. The shops that are open have their shutters half up, like eyes half closed. Every third window has black already, a ribbon, a scrap of crepe, a shawl pinned inside the glass where nothing else could be got. The omnibus drivers have crepe bows on their whips. On the corner of Piccadilly, a crossing sweeper, a boy of maybe 9, has tied a strip of black rag around his broom handle, and something about that, the broom, the rag, the boy's raw bare ankles above his boots, closes your throat worse than anything the Queen could have draped on a palace. Nobody told him to do that. Nobody told any of them. The bells have been going since Sunday. Muffled peals. They wrap the clappers in leather so each note lands soft and dead, a bell with a cold in its head, and once you've heard a muffled bell you never mistake it again, because it sounds exactly like what it is, a voice that has been made to swallow itself. Every parish in London, every parish in England, near enough. Think about that as the wagon jolts you down Piccadilly with your spine against a packing case. At this hour, this same dead sound is falling on ploughed fields in Suffolk, on the docks at Liverpool, on hillsides in Wales where nobody in the village ever saw the man or heard his voice. Your mother is hearing it. Right now. The same sound. Paddington Station is gaslight and steam and men shouting quietly, which you would not have believed possible before tonight. The Great Western has cleared a goods platform. There are cases from Bantings, cases from Holland and Sons, bales from the warehouses, coils of new rope, trestles, and a long crate, heavier than the others, that 4 men lift with a particular care, and nobody says what's in it, and you don't ask. But you were in the workshop when the lead sheeting was cut, so you know. You ride in the goods van with the cases. It is savagely cold. The van has gaps at the doors a finger wide, and the wind comes through them like wire. You sit on a bale of black cloth with your hands pushed into your armpits and your breath standing in the air, and through the gap you watch the lamps of London thin out into darkness, and then there's only the rock and clank of the rails, the smell of coal smoke and cold iron and dyed wool, and the guards' lanterns swinging shadows up the wall. 21 miles, London to Windsor. The royal family does it in under an hour. Albert helped make that true. He was mad for railways, mad for engines, mad for anything with valves and progress in it. The joke, if you can call it a joke, being that the same modern castle he modernised, the same great house of gaslight and speaking tubes could not manage a clean drain, and now the railway he loved is carrying his coffin led down the line in the dark. You must sleep a little, because the next thing you know, the guard is shaking your boot, and the van door is open on freezing black air, and a porter is saying, "Windsor, lad, look alive," and you step down onto the platform and look up, and there it is. You've seen it in engravings. Everyone has. But an engraving is the size of your hand, and this is the size of the sky. The castle stands on its chalk hill straight above the town, a grey wall of it, towers and battlements black against a black-blue night, and at the centre the great round tower, huge and blunt, and from its flagstaff. You have to tilt your head all the way back. The royal standard, hanging at half-mast, lit faintly from below by the town's gas, stirring in the wind like something breathing slow. 900 years near enough. Something has stood on that hill. William the Conqueror threw up the first earthworks within a generation of Hastings. The Round Tower's stone base has been there since the 12th century. Kings have been born in there, married in there, buried in there. One of them, Charles I, was carried in through the snow with his head in a box beside him. Your grandfather's grandfather's grandfather could have stood on this same rise, looked up at this same tower, and felt this same smallness travel down through his boots into the ground. It's that old. It's that real. And somewhere behind those walls, in a room on the north side where the windows look out over the river, a 42-year-old man is lying on a bed with his hands crossed, and it is your job, yours, Thomas Wren, of a village near Bury, population 311, to help build the box he leaves in. You Banting's boy, a voice at your elbow, a thick-set man with a lantern, muffler up to his eyes. Carts waiting, and keep your voice down through the town. Why, you ask? It's near midnight. Who'd hear? He looks at you over the muffler for a moment. Everyone, he says. Nobody in this town has slept since Saturday. Now move. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. It's not London. That's the first thing your nose tells you, before your brain has caught up. No coal fog thick enough to chew, no river stink. This is different. Layers, but different layers. Cold stone, first, an old mineral cellar smell, the smell of walls that have never once in 800 years been fully warm. Then tallow and lamp oil greasy and close from the passage outside. Then damp wool, which is you. Your own coat, hung on a nail, still exhaling last night's train. Then, faint and low and everywhere, wood smoke and something green and bitter, and it takes you a moment. Rosemary. Someone is burning rosemary, and under it all, underneath everything, so faint you might be imagining it, a sweetish, carbolic, chemical wrongness that the rosemary is there to cover, and your stomach knows what it is before you let yourself think the word. Welcome to Windsor Castle. Tuesday, the 17th of December, 1861. You are lying on a straw palliasse on a truckle bed in a servant's room in the lower ward, a stone box barely 8 feet by 10, shared with a Holland and Sons journeyman named Cutler, who is still snoring with his boots on. Yes, boots on. That's normal this week. Nobody at your level undresses because nobody at your level knows when they'll be sent for. Privacy, sleep, warm water, daylight, luxuries. Nobody down here can afford them just now. Somewhere above you a bell tolls once, the great bell of Windsor, muffled. You wait, counting in the dark. 60 seconds. It tolls again. It has been doing that, you will learn, in the daylight hour since Saturday, and it will keep doing it until he's in the ground. The men who ring it work in shifts. 1 note a minute, hour upon hour. By the end of the week you will hear it in your sleep. Some nights you hear it still. You get up before anyone tells you to, because 3 years with Bantings has taught you that the apprentice who is standing when the foreman walks in has a different week than the apprentice who is lying down. The stone floor through your stockinged feet is cold enough to feel wet. There's a basin of water in the corner. The surface has a skin of ice, actual ice, thin as paper, and you break it with 2 fingers and wash your face, and the cold goes into your skull like a nail, and you're awake, properly awake, gasping awake, drying your face on your shirt tail because there is no towel. Your clothes tell anyone who looks exactly what you are, which in this world is the whole point of clothes. Rough flannel shirt gone soft and grey at the collar, fustian trousers, black smeared at the thighs where you wipe your hands, waistcoat. Your one good thing is your neckerchief, black silk, real silk, bought with your own shillings the day your indentures were signed, and it marks you as a skilled man's apprentice, a tradesman in becoming, and not a labourer. Appearances matter in this castle more than anywhere on earth. They matter this week most of all, because the only appearance permitted is black, and yours, for once in your life, is correct. Cutler wakes like a sack falling over, groans, looks at the ice in the basin, and says the first of the perhaps 40 sentences he will speak all week. If I'd wanted to freeze for a living, I'd have been a fishmonger. Breakfast is in the servants' hall, bread dripping and beer eaten fast and standing, among footmen and housemaids and scarlet-coated soldiers of the guard, all keeping their voices at the level of church. And here you notice the thing you will keep noticing all week, the thing that makes the back of your neck prickle. Everyone's eyes are red. Not weeping, not now, not at breakfast, but recently. The footmen, big men, chosen for their height and their calves, men who serve emperors their soup without blinking, red-eyed. A kitchen maid stands at the end of the table buttering bread, and the tears just run down her face while her hands keep working. Butter, stack, and nobody remarks on it, because there is nothing to remark. It's weather. It's simply the weather indoors this week. They knew him, is the thing. That's what you hadn't understood, coming up from London where he was a portrait and a name in the papers, and a German accent men sneered at over their beer. Here he was the master of the house. Here he was the man who reorganised the kitchens, who knew the head gardener's children's names, who came down to the dairy he built at Frogmore and checked the tiles. 21 years he ran this place. The Queen reigns, Albert governed, the farms, the accounts, the drains. God help him, the drains. Eat faster, Cutler says. Mr. Holland wants us in the chapel at 7, and Mr. Holland is a man who says 7 and means 10 minutes before. St. George's Chapel stands in the lower ward like a ship in a stone harbour, and when you walk in at 10 minutes to 7 with a coil of rope over your shoulder, your breath stops in your chest, and the rope nearly slides off, and Cutler has to shove you between the shoulder blades to keep you moving. You have never been inside a building like this. You did not know buildings could do this. The ceiling, you can't help it. Your head goes back like a farm boy's, which is what you are. The ceiling is stone, but it doesn't look like stone. It looks like something that grew. Fan vaulting, they call it. Ribs of pale stone spreading from the tops of the pillars like frost spreading on a window, meeting overhead in carved bosses 70 feet above the floor. Edward IV began this chapel in 1475. Henry VIII lies under the choir floor under a plain black slab you will walk over 100 times this week. Henry VIII, the man himself, 8 feet down with Jane Seymour beside him, and the head of Charles I tucked into the same vault, and you walk over them carrying rope. Morning light the colour of pewter comes through the great east window. Along both sides of the choir hang the banners of the Knights of the Garter, silk squares of scarlet and blue and gold above the carved oak stalls, each stall crested with a knight's helm and mantling, 3.5 centuries of them, and every banner hangs dead still in the cold air, and below all that colour, all that gold, men in black are killing the light. That's what it is. That's your work this week, and you might as well say it plainly. Mr. Holland's men are hanging black cloth from the choir stalls, black cloth up the sides of the aisles, black baize across the floor to swallow footsteps, black serge over the rails. The Garter banners stay. Someone very senior decided that the dead man's own banner among them, because he was a Knight of the Garter too, and his banner hangs there with the rest. But everything below shoulder height, everything a mourner's eye will fall on, goes dark. You are building the inside of a closed eyelid. Mr. Holland's foreman is a Scot named Geddes, grey-whiskered, with a folding rule in his hand at all times the way a priest holds a testament. He looks at you for exactly 2 seconds. Bantings? Yes, sir. Thomas Wren. Can you sew a straight seam standing on a ladder in the cold with your fingers dead? I've never tried, sir. Something happens under the whiskers that might be a smile being strangled at birth. Honest, at least. You'll do. Ladder. 3rd bay. And Wren, he doesn't raise his voice, none of them raise their voices, the whole chapel works in a murmur under that one tolling bell. Mind your feet on the slabs, you're walking on kings. So that's your morning and your afternoon, and by candlelight your evening. Up a ladder in the 3rd bay with a needle in your dead fingers and tacks held in your lips, stitching lengths of black superfine, hauling the sewn breadths up on a line, the cloth heavy as a wet sail and getting heavier as the hours go by, or maybe that's your arms getting lighter. The work has a sound. You'll never forget the sound. The shear of scissors through wool, long strokes, shh, shh. The tap, tap, tap of tack hammers, dozens of them, small and polite, like rain on a coffin. No, like rain on a roof. The creak of ladder rungs, the slither of dropped cloth pooling on stone, and every 60 seconds, above it all, through it all, that one muffled bell until the work itself starts keeping time to it, until you find yourself driving a tack on the toll without meaning to, every man in the chapel unconsciously working to the beat of a dead man's minute. Your fingertips split at the corners of the nails by mid-afternoon. The cold does that. Cold and wool and tack heads. The splits are small and they sting like paper cuts, and they leave tiny dark prints on the pale stone of the pillar where you steady yourself, and you scrub them off with your sleeve, horrified before Geddes can see. And then you look at that pillar, 400 years old, carved by men whose names nobody wrote down, men with split fingers, and you think they left marks too, somewhere under the whitewash and the centuries. Men like you, freezing in this same building for some other funeral, some other king, thinking about their dinner. The chapel doesn't care whose body it gets next. That's what the stone says if you listen. It has swallowed Plantagenets and Tudors, and it will swallow this German prince, and it will still be standing when everyone who wept this week is dust. And there is something in that thought that is either horror or comfort. And at 19, on a ladder, you honestly cannot tell which. At the noon break, you eat bread and cheese sitting on the steps outside the south door, because eating inside is not to be thought of, and a chapel verger, an old man with a dewdrop permanently at the end of his nose, sits beside you and tells you things in the tone of a man who has been waiting 50 years for someone to ask. He shows you where the scaffold timber was stored. The catafalque, he corrects himself. The great platform the coffin will rest on, being built this very hour by the joiners at the West End. He tells you the vault under the choir has a mechanism, an actual machine, by which a coffin can be lowered from the chapel floor into the royal vault below. The same opening through which they lowered George III and George IV and William IV. Mad king, fat king, sailor king, down through the same square of floor. And the young prince'll go down it Monday, the verger says, and mark me, boy, he won't stay down there long. She'll build him something. That little woman will build him something the like of which England has never seen. He wipes the dewdrop on his cuff. Grief like hers doesn't fit in a vault. He is right, as it happens. Within days the Queen will buy the ground at Frogmore 1/2 mile away across the home park, and she will raise a mausoleum of granite and marble with a ceiling of gold, and she will spend 40 years visiting it, and in 1901 they will carry her in beside him at last. But you don't know that, eating cheese on the steps. Nobody knows anything yet except that the bell keeps tolling, and the cloth keeps coming, and your hands hurt. You believe it? Cutler asks that night, boots on in the dark. That she's lost her mind? They're saying in the town she's lost her mind. I don't know, you say. I never saw her. You will, Cutler says and turns over. Poor devil, not her, you. You lie awake a long time working out which of you he meant. Wednesday begins with the summons, and the summons is a man. His name is Mr. Rowe, and he is Banting's senior man at the castle, and you have known him 3 years the way you know a mountain, from the bottom. He is 50, small, exact, with hands like a surgeon's and a voice that never once, in your hearing, has risen above the level required to reach the person he is addressing, and not 1 inch further. He finds you at the chapel at 8, and takes you outside into a fine freezing mist, and stands with you under the archway and looks at you for a long moment. Mr. Banting spoke for you, he says. Steady hands, silent mouth. Yes, sir. You're to come up to the state apartments with me. There is work there that wants a small man with steady hands, and every other man I have is large or shaking or both. A pause. The mist beads on the nap of his hat. Wren. What you see in that part of the castle you will not speak of. Not to Cutler, not to your mother, not to me, afterwards, unless I ask. Men in our trade are let in where no one is let in, on the sole condition that we are furniture. We see nothing, we hear nothing. We are a chest of drawers that walks. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. No, he says, not unkindly. But you will by supper. The way up is the way servants go, not the great staircases you will glimpse later, all gilt and armour, but a spiral stair in the thickness of a wall, stone treads worn into hollows by 600 years of exactly this, servants carrying things upward. You carry a case of tools and a roll of white flannel. The stair is so narrow your shoulders brush both walls and the walls sweat cold, and the only light falls in blades through arrow slits, and you climb past floor after floor, your breath loud in the stone tube. Rose heels ticking above you, until a door opens and the world changes. Carpet, that's the first thing. After days of stone, the floor gives under your boots like turf, and the silence changes too. The stone silence was hard. This silence is upholstered, thick, swallowing. A corridor longer than your village street, hung with paintings in gold frames, lit by lamps at noon because every curtain in the state apartments is drawn. You walk past a Van Dyck without knowing it. You walk past a table that cost more than every building in the parish you were born in, and down the whole length of that grand corridor at intervals stand footmen and pages, moving nothing but their eyes, and every mirror. This is what undoes you. This detail. This is the one your hands remember. Every mirror is covered, sheeted in black or turned to the wall. 30 feet of gilt-framed glass after glass after glass, all blinded. They say it's an old custom, that a house in mourning covers its mirrors. Some say it's so grief can't see itself. Some say worse things, older things, about what a mirror might hold in a death house. Nobody in that corridor would tell you which the Queen believes. Perhaps only that a woman who cannot bear to see her own living face is owed the mercy of not meeting it at every turn. The rooms you're wanted in are on the north front. You're one of 6 men, and the work is this. The blue room. The room where he died. is to be kept, not cleared, kept forever, though nobody uses that word yet. Photographers have already been in. You saw the plates cases going down the corridor. The Queen has given orders that nothing is to be altered. His rooms are to stand exactly as he left them, his pen on the desk, his blotting book open, and every evening, beginning now and continuing, although no one this week could possibly guess it, for the next 40 years, hot water is to be carried in and set at his washstand, and his clothes laid out fresh upon the bed, as if the dead man might yet come in cold from the terrace and want to change for dinner. Your work is smaller than all of that, and it is the hardest work of your life. You're wanted for the fitting of the outer cases. Measurements have been taken. The shells are being built at speed in London and at the castle workshops, and what Roe needs is a man who can be trusted inside those rooms, with a rule and a notebook, checking dimensions against doorways and stairs. Because here is the thing nobody thinks about, the thing that is the whole of your trade. A coffin of state is not one box, it is 4, an inner shell of pine, close-fitted, lined and pillowed in satin. Around that a case of lead, soldered airtight, necessary because he will lie above ground 11 days, and because a royal coffin must be capable of standing in a vault for a century. Around the lead, oak, and around the oak, the state coffin proper. Crimson velvet, gilt handles, a plate of inscription, 4 boxes, one inside another, and by the end the whole affair will weigh the better part of 1/2 ton, and it must be carried by living men down real corridors and around real corners, and if the measurements are wrong, if the turn at the foot of a stair is 6 inches tighter than the drawing says, then the most solemn procession in Europe stops dead while everyone watches, and that must not happen. And this is why a boy from Suffolk is standing in the private apartments of Windsor Castle at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning with a brass-tipped rule in his split fingers. You measure doorways while men who run an empire walk past you. You kneel in a corridor and take the width of a turn, twice, 3 times. Write the figures, and your pencil hand is shaking very slightly, not from the cold now, and you press your wrist against the floor to still it. And then, in the afternoon, the door at the end of the corridor opens, and you learn what silence actually is. You hear her before you see her, which is to say you hear the corridor change. The footmen were already still, now they are stone. A rustle of heavy silk, a door, and a small procession comes down the grand corridor. 2 ladies in black, a Highland servant, and between them, in the deepest black you have ever seen, black that swallows lamplight and gives nothing back, a small woman, and you have 1 second to understand who you are looking at before your training takes you. You are against the wall, eyes down, rule pressed flat to your chest, being furniture. But you see her. In that 1 second, and in the 3 or 4 seconds of her passing, from beneath your lowered lids, you see the Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland walk past you at a distance of 5 feet. She is tiny. That's the first shock. She is smaller than your youngest sister. Her face is the second shock. You have seen her face all your life, on coins, in prints, over mantelpieces, a round, firm, composed face. The face going past you has been hollowed, not aged, hollowed, like ground after a flood, the same shape and all the substance gone from under it. Her eyes are fixed on nothing about 10 feet ahead of her. One of the ladies is speaking to her, very low. There is no sign she hears. She holds something in her hands against her waist, and it takes you until nightfall to realize what it was. A miniature, a little portrait. She was carrying his face through the house, 42 years old, and this week the newspapers of the world write about her as one writes about a sinking ship. She has lost her mother this same year, February, the Duchess of Kent, and now, before that black was even folded away, this, 2 of them in 10 months. The word going round the servants' hall, whispered, appalled, is that she has said she wishes to die. The word going round the town is madness. The truth going past you in the corridor is simpler and worse. It is a person to whom the worst thing has happened, and who must be a public institution anyway, at 9 and at noon and at 4 and forever, and there is no cottage for her to draw the curtains of, because her cottage has 600 rooms and a standing army. She turns at the end of the corridor. The door closes. The footmen become flesh again. Somewhere a lady's maid lets out a breath. Roe appears beside you and looks at your notebook, not your face, which is a mercy. Doorways, he says. Done, sir. All but the north stair. Then the north stair. And then, so quietly it barely disturbs the air, without any change in his expression at all. Now you understand what the silence is for. You do. It isn't ceremony. It isn't etiquette. 600 people are keeping this castle quiet the way you keep quiet in the room of someone in unbearable pain. The whole building is a held breath. The whole country is. That night you cannot eat. Cutler notices, says nothing, and pushes his beer across to you, which from Cutler is a speech. Thursday, and Roe sends you down into the town, and the town is its own story. Windsor is small. You could walk end to end of it in 20 minutes, and it lives off the castle the way a mistletoe lives off an oak, and this week the town is a mirror held up to the hill. Every shop in Peascod Street and Thames Street is shuttered or half-shuttered, and every shutter, every door, every lamp-post near the castle gate wears black, not fine black, whatever black could be got. A butcher has draped his rail, the rail where the geese for Christmas should be hanging this very week, with lengths of black calico, and the geese hang among the folds like a bad dream. The toy shop has cleared its window entirely, and set in the middle of the bare boards one engraving of the prince, and around it nothing. Christmas is 1 week away. There will be no Christmas here, not really. The papers have already begun saying it will be the saddest Christmas England has kept in living memory, and every child in this town knows better than to be heard laughing in the street. Your errand takes you to a plumber's, a real plumber, a worker of lead, which is what the word has meant since Roman times. Plumbum, lead, the same lead that may or may not have had a hand in this whole story, if you believe the men who blame the pipes, to arrange solder and irons to be sent up to the castle, because the lead shell will be sealed on sight, and the sealing of it is a plumber's job, done with fire and metal in a room where absolute dignity is required, which is a sentence to think about. The plumber is a huge, slow, gentle man named Diggory, with burned scars up both forearms like a map of rivers, and while his boy weighs out solder bars, soft, dense sticks that clink with a duller sound than any other metal, a dead sound, tin and lead. Diggory talks, 'cause Diggory is the sort who talks. Done 2 of these, he says. Not royal, mind, gentry. It's the soldering wants care. You run your iron along the seam and the flux hisses and spits, and the smell of it fills the room. Hot metal and tallow, and the family's often just the other side of the door, and you're kneeling there with a fire pot. He shakes his head slowly. It's the last thing, do you see? Carpenter closes the wood that can be opened. Once my seam goes round, that's the world shut out, or shut in. He looks at his own forearms. I always work slow on the last foot. Seems owed. The boy wraps the solder in sacking. Diggory walks you to the door and stops you with one scarred hand, light as a moth for all its size, on your shoulder. They're saying in the Star and Garter it was the typhoid. Bad water, bad drains. His voice drops. My cousin's a fitter. Worked at the castle in '58 on the new works. Says there's cesspits under that hill older than the Reformation. 53 of them, he says, though how anyone counted I don't know. All the money in the world up there, boy. The finest doctors in England. And they told her almost to the last that he'd mend. Told the country he was better. There was a bulletin on the Thursday that said he'd rallied. And the whole time, under the gold ceilings, the pipes, he straightens up. There's your lesson if you want one. Death don't read the visiting book. It comes up the drain. You walk back up the hill with the sacking parcel heavy as sin under your arm, and the castle grows over you as you climb, and the bell tolls, and you think about 53 cesspits and gold ceilings, and about your own village, where the well is 40 paces from the churchyard and nobody has ever thought a single thing about it. Whether it was truly the typhoid, whether it was the drains, whether it was, as quieter doctors will wonder in quieter decades, something older and slower, a stomach illness of years dressed up at the end in typhoid's name, nobody in 1861 can tell you, because the Queen will permit no post-mortem, and what the Queen will not permit does not happen. He worked himself grey, that much everyone agrees. 20 years of dawn desk work in cold rooms. He liked them cold. Mending the monarchy, the Great Exhibition, 30 committees, and in his last month, sick as he already was, rewriting a government despatch to America so tactfully that men will later say he took 2 countries out of a war from his sickbed. His last public act, softening one letter. Then the fever took the pen out of his hand. At the castle gate the sentry's bearskin is dusted with beginning snow. He stands like the dead. Only his breath moves. That evening Roe finds you cleaning tools and stands watching your hands for a while. The gun carriage came today, he says, and the household have settled the order of procession. 9 days he'll have lain by Monday. He picks up one of your chisels, sights along it, sets it down precisely where it was. The country wanted a great state funeral. Lying in state, the streets of London, 500,000 people. Do you know what she ordered instead? No, sir. Private. As private as such a thing can be. St. George's, the family, the great men of state, and no crowd. No catafalque in Westminster Hall. No London at all. He hated fuss, you see. Hated display for its own sake. Told her so, apparently more than once. No lying in state, no embalming pomp, none of it. A pause. The one time in her life she'll get to give him exactly what he asked for, and it's this. He looks at your split fingertips. Goose grease, he says, before you sleep. You'll want those hands Monday. Monday, sir? You're to be in the chapel in the procession service with me. Somebody must walk before who knows every doorway and every stair because somebody measured them. Almost, the ghost of something warm crosses the exactness of his face. You did the measuring, Wren. You'll do the walking. That Thursday evening, something happens at the gates that you will tell nobody about for 30 years, and then only your wife, and then only once. You're sent down at dusk with a message for the station about Friday's early goods train, and coming back up Castle Hill in the blue half-dark you find people standing at the closed gates. Not a crowd exactly. Not what London would call a crowd. Perhaps 40 of them, strung along the railings in the cold, and what stops you is that they are doing nothing. Not pressing, not calling, not craning. Standing, shopmen with their aprons still on under their coats, a farmer and his wife who by the mud on them have walked in from some distance, 2 Eton masters in their gowns, women with children muffled to the eyes, all of them simply standing in the freezing dusk, looking up at the dark mass of the castle and the 1 or 2 lit windows on the north front, the way people stand outside a house where someone lies ill, except the illness is over, and they know it's over, and still they come and stand, because where else does a body take what it's feeling? And along the foot of the railings, laid on the frost-hardened ground, are flowers, in the 3rd week of December. God knows what it cost them or where it was got. Hothouse blooms from some nursery, sprigs of evergreen, 1 bunch of violets gone black-edged with frost, laid in a thin line along the base of the gates by people who will never be let in, for a woman who will never see them, and no one told anyone to do this, the way no one told the crossing sweeper about his rag. A man near you is holding up a small girl, 4 or 5 years old, wrapped like a parcel so she can see through the railings, and she isn't crying, she's just looking with the enormous seriousness of small children at large events, and the man says to her quietly in a Berkshire voice, "There now, you'll remember you saw it when you're old." And the child nods, gravely, as if agreeing to terms, and she will. That's the thing that gets you, standing there with the station's receipt in your pocket. That child will be alive in 1930-something. An old woman in a wireless age telling grandchildren in a tone they'll only half believe, "I was there the week the prince died. My father held me up at the gates of Windsor. There were flowers in the frost." Memory is a rope let down through time, and you are watching someone's grandfather tie the first knot in it. You go in through the wicket past the sentry, and you don't look back, because your eyes are doing something unprofessional, and the sentry can see your face. Supper that night is late and you nearly miss it, and would have gone hungry if not for Mrs. Corbin. Mrs. Corbin is not the housekeeper of Windsor Castle. The actual housekeeper of Windsor Castle is a personage as remote from you as the Pope. Mrs. Corbin rules the particular servants' hall where the tradesmen are fed, a stout Berkshire widow with forearms like a blacksmith and a voice she never needs to raise because it carries like a bell across water, and for reasons you cannot fathom she's decided somewhere in the last 4 days that you are too thin and that this is a personal affront to her hall. "Sit," she says when you come in past 9 to a cleared room, and puts before you, unasked, a plate kept warm on the hearth, boiled beef, carrots, a wedge of cold plum duff after, and sits herself down opposite with her mending. She's always mending, the way the Rosette woman was always sewing. The whole female world of 1861 keeps its hands moving as a fish keeps swimming, and watches you eat with the frank supervision of a farmer watching stock. "You were up top today," she says. Not a question. The hollow stones again. "Yes, missus." "See her?" You hesitate, and she nods as if the hesitation were a full report and bites off a thread. "I've been in service here 22 years, she says. "I remember when he came. 20 years old and the papers sneering before the boat had docked. Penniless German princeling, they said. Come for our money." The needle goes in, out. "And I'll tell you what I saw with these eyes, young man, because you're carrying his boxes and you ought to know whose. I saw the household accounts. That had been robbery and ruin since the old king's day. Candles. They used to take home the candle ends, hundreds of pounds of it a year. I saw him go through it all like a gale through a barn. Made enemies. Oh, made enemies by the score. Kitchen used to be that far from the dining rooms the food came up stone cold to the Queen of England's own table, and had done for a century, and everyone said it couldn't be helped. He helped it. In, out. They laughed at him for it. Great princes don't count candles. Well, the needle stops. The candles got counted, and the money saved built model cottages, and I could show you the cottages. That's all I know about greatness, but I know it. She looks at your plate, sees it empty, and is satisfied. They don't just serve the food up there, you know, she says, tipping her head at the state floors, and it takes you a second to catch that she means something larger. The customers, the great folk, they don't just eat what you make them, they eat how you make them feel. He made this house feel looked after. 20 years, every soul in it. And now, the needle starts again, faster. Now the house doesn't know what it is. You can feel it in the walls. A house that doesn't know what it is. She shakes her head at her mending. She'll keep his rooms just so. You mark me, hot water and all, as if he's coming in from the terrace. Folk will call it madness. Is it? You ask, before you can stop yourself. Mrs. Corbin considers this for a long moment, needle poised, and gives you the only answer you will ever wholly trust on the subject, then or in any of the 60 years you have left. It's love, with nowhere to go, she says. Same thing sometimes. Now get to your bed, you're grey, and take the heel of that loaf, don't argue, I've no use for it. You take the heel of the loaf. You do not argue. Nobody argues with Mrs. Corbin, and no one ever has, and the empire would be the better if she ran more of it. Friday is the day of the lead, and you will spend the rest of your life not talking about Friday, so we will walk through it slowly once, and then leave it where it lies. You are called at 6, not with the others. Rowe himself, with a candle, and behind him in the passage 2 of Banting's senior men down from London on the night train, and Diggory the plumber with his boy and his fire-pot, and nobody says anything beyond your name, and you dress with your heart going like a bird against a window. The Blue Room is on the first floor of the north front, and its windows, behind their drawn curtains, look out over the terrace toward Eton, and it is called the Blue Room for its hangings, and 2 kings died in it before him. George IV in this room, William IV in this room, which he knew, being a man who knew everything, and one wonders now whether he thought of it, lying there through those last days while they moved his bed to the window so he could see the sky. You do not go into the Blue Room. Let's be clear about what a 19-year-old apprentice is and is not permitted, even now, even needed as you are. The private work, the tender work, was done days ago by other and older hands. What stands now in the adjoining room, on trestles that you yourself checked for level on Wednesday, is the shell. Closed pine, white-draped, waiting. Your work, the trade's work this morning, is the enclosing of that shell in lead, and the enclosing of the lead in oak, and the bearing of the whole to where it must go. That is all it is, you tell yourself on the stairs, joinery and plumbing and portering. That is all it is. It is not all it is. The room is cold and smells of rosemary, hot charcoal from the fire-pot, and beeswax. The lead case stands open on its own trestles beside the shell, and lead has a colour like no other thing, a soft matte whale grey that eats the candlelight, and when you help lift the empty case's end to true it on the trestles, the weight is an insult, an argument against itself. How can the empty box be this heavy, and the metal is so cold it burns through the flannel wrapped round your palms, and it gives very slightly under your grip, the way lead does, taking the print of you. 8 men lift the shell. You are one of the 8, because you are there, because your hands are steady, because Rowe says quietly, Wren, the foot, left side, and there is no world in which you refuse. You take your place. You set your hands under the pine. With me, Ro says, and rise. And you lift Albert, Prince Consort, husband of the Queen, father of 9, dreamer of the Crystal Palace, into the air. The weight comes onto your arms, and it is a man's weight and more, and the pine edge presses a line into your fingers that you will feel for 3 days, and 8 men breathe together, one loud breath through 16 nostrils, and shuffle. You have to shuffle. Dignity is a myth invented by people who've never carried anything. Sideways, in step, small steps, the senior man counting under his breath so faintly it is barely more than lips moving, and the lead case receives the shell with a sound you will hear again in dreams, a soft, enormous, final settling, wood into metal, snow off a roof. Then Diggory works, and everyone else stands back against the walls with their hands folded and their eyes down. And this is the strangest half hour of your life. The Queen's most private apartments, paintings worth counties looking down, and a huge scarred tradesman kneeling with his iron and his solder in a smell of hot flux and tallow smoke, going slowly, slowly along the seam, the solder hissing where the iron kisses it, spitting tiny stars, and each inch of the bright seam going dull silver behind him as it cools, and nobody speaking, and the muffled bell outside tolling the minutes one by one as the world is soldered out or in. He works slow on the last foot. You watch him do it. He wasn't lying about that. The oak follows. That is carpentry. That's your own trade. Cauls and screws, brass gone black by order, and you drive screws until your wrist burns, and every screw sinking home with that clean resisting bite of steel in oak is somehow the most honest thing that has happened all week. Then the crimson state coffin over all, velvet the colour of dried wine, and now the whole stands complete on its trestles, and now it needs 10 men and a lifting frame, and now you understand every measurement you took on Wednesday, every doorway, every turn, because the procession from this floor to the resting place below is a problem in inches, and you walk before the bearers down the route you measured, walking backwards half the time, your hand raised, easing them, left 6 inches, hold, now, your voice a thread, and the great weight swims behind you through the doorways of the castle like a ship you are piloting through locks, and not once, not at one single turn does it touch. Not once. Whatever else your life turns out to be, there will always have been this. It did not touch. They set it down where it will lie until Monday, and the Chapel Royal men take over, and the candles are lit, and the guard mounts its first vigil, and the tradesmen of England, having done what tradesmen do, pick up their tools and go away by the servants' stair, invisible as agreed. On the stair, halfway down, in the arrow-slit light, Ro stops. The men behind stop. And Ro, that exact and silent man, takes off his hat and stands for perhaps 10 seconds facing the wall, and puts it back on, and goes on down. Every man does the same as he passes the spot without a word, without knowing why that spot, and so do you. Cold light on your face for 10 seconds, and whatever it was you did there, pray, or thank, or only breathe, you never do find its name. In the yard, in the ordinary daylight, which is a shock, like coming up from under water, Diggory is loading his firepot onto a barrow. He looks at your face, whatever is on it. First one, he says. Yes. He nods slowly and picks up the barrow handles. It's not the weight in your arms that stays, he says. You'll see. Arms forget in a week. It's the weight in the room. And he wheels his fire out of the castle of the kings of England, one wheel squeaking, needing grease, all the way to the gate. Saturday morning, and for the first time in 6 days nobody wants you until noon. You stand in the lower ward not knowing what to do with your own arms. That's what a week like this does. It takes your hours away so completely that when one is handed back you hold it like a foreign coin. Cutler has gone to sleep in daylight, boots on, an act of pure genius you haven't the discipline for, so you walk, and because the whole castle knows by now who you are and what your hands did yesterday, the servants' halls know everything always before the ministers do, a sergeant at the Norman gate looks at you, looks at the little pass Roe wrote you, and instead of turning you back, jerks his chin toward the great stone drum at the centre of everything. Terrace is shut, he says, but the motte path's clear, and there's a man up there feeds the birds about now, who'd likely be glad of company. Mind the ice on the steps. The round tower stands on the original mound, the actual heaped chalk and clay that Norman spades piled up here within living memory of the conquest, and you climb the path that spirals it with your breath smoking and your boot nails skidding on frost, and at the top by the base of the tower where the flagstaff rises with its half-masted standard cracking softly in the wind, there is indeed a man feeding birds. He is old the way oak gate posts are old, 75 if he's a day. He wears a long blue coat of antique military cut with a scarlet collar, and one sleeve of it is empty and pinned, and he is scattering crumbs to a mob of jackdaws with his one hand, and the jackdaws know him. They walk on his boots. "You'll be the boy," he says, without turning round. "Sir, the Banting's boy. Steady hands." He turns. His face is a walnut with 2 very bright blue eyes set in it. "I'm one of the military knights, son. Poor knights of Windsor. They called us for 400 years, till the 4th George decided poor sounded shabby. Old soldiers. The Crown houses us down there along the wall, and we pray for the sovereign daily in the chapel. Your chapel, the one you've been dressing all week. And in exchange we get lodging and coals and the pleasure of dying in the finest view in England. Herrick, formerly of the 52nd foot. He does not offer the hand. The hand is full of crumbs and jackdaws, and before you're too polite to ask, Waterloo. The arm stayed in Belgium. The rest of me came home. Waterloo. You count in your head. 46 years ago. This man stood in the smoke at Waterloo while your grandfather was cutting hay. Come to the parapet, he says. You've earned the view, I hear. The whole hill hears everything, you know. Stones are hollow. Come on. And you step to the edge of the roof of England, and the country falls away below you, and your breath simply stops. Because it has snowed in the night, a light snow, a dusting, and the sun is low and gold through the smoke of 10,000 chimneys, and the world is laid out like a map on a table. The Thames curls silver through white meadows, doubling back on itself as if it can't bear to leave. Directly below, across the river, Eton College raises its chapel like a smaller answer to yours, and the playing fields lie white and empty. The boys sent home, this term ended early by a death. 12 counties, they say, on a clear day from this tower, and today is clear. The woods of the great park rolling south, the long walk running from the castle straight as a rule for 3 miles to the copper horse of George III on his hill. Westward the haze that is Reading, eastward, low on the world's rim, a grey-brown smudge like a thumbprint on the sky, and that smudge is London, 3 million souls, the largest city that has ever existed on the earth. And below you, at the foot of the hill, small as a toy, Half a mile off in the White Home Park, a little ornamental lake, dark trees, and a house. Frogmore. You don't know yet why your eye should rest there. Nobody does. But before this year is out, the ground beside that house will be bought, and the granite ordered, and everything this week has been will be given a shape in stone on that exact spot. And 40 years from now an old queen will make her last journey down this hill to lie there beside him at last. Yours looking, without knowing it, at the end of the story. There, Herrick says, pointing with his chin at everything. That's what he saw, the prince. He'd walk the terrace below of a morning early, before the household stirred. I'd see him from up here. Always with papers. Always. The jackdaws settle on the parapet between you like a row of small undertakers. Men in London called him the German. Cold fish, they said. Do you know what I say? I say I watched that cold fish stand down there on the slopes teaching his boys to fly a kite, and I have seen him come up out of the home farm with mud to the knee. Mud, sun, actual mud, arguing drains with the bailiff. He stops. The word sits between you. Drains. He lets it sit. Old soldiers don't flinch from things. 42, he says at last. I've had 76 years, and half of me's been buried in Belgium since I was 30, and he gets 42. You explain that to me and I'll die grateful. You have nothing. He doesn't expect anything. He feeds the jackdaws. You were in the room, he says. It isn't a question, and it isn't gossip either. You can hear the difference. You don't answer, which is an answer, and he nods, satisfied with you. Then here's the only thing I know that's worth the climb, he says. I've carried men off a field, friends, and I'll tell you what nobody tells you. You'll want to forget it, and you won't be able to. And one day, years off, you'll find out you've stopped wanting to. What your hands did this week, some man had to do it, and it fell to you, and you did it well, and that's the whole of it. That's the trade you're really in now, boy. Not wood, not cloth. Last things. Somebody must do the last things properly, or the world couldn't bear itself. He empties the last crumbs off his palm. Now go down before you freeze. And Wren, the blue eyes crease. Monday, when it's all thunder and archbishops down there and you're flattened against your pillar feeling like a mouse at a coronation. Remember, you're the only man in that chapel who knows the weight of him. Not one duke of them all knows that. You do. Carry it accordingly. You go down the spiral path with your ears burning in the cold, and behind you the jackdaws lift off the parapet all at once, a black scatter against the white sky, like a handful of mourning cast on the wind. That Saturday evening, for the first time since London, you leave the castle after dark, because Cutler declares that if he does not sit in a proper tap room, with a proper fire for 1 hour, he will not answer for his conduct at the funeral of anybody. And you go with him down the hill into the town, past the sentries, into streets where the frost has made every cobble its own small mirror. The White Hart is full, and the Star and Garter is fuller, and you end in a low tap-room off Thames Street whose name you never learn, a room of black beams and brown varnish, and a fire like a furnace door. And the heat of it after a week of stone hits your face like a hand, and your fingers thawing, hurt so much you laugh, and Cutler orders 2 pints of porter with the air of a man completing a religious duty. And the room is full of strangers, and the strangers are full of the only subject there is. Half of them are press. You've never seen press before, not massed like this. Reporters down from London for Monday, from the Times and the Illustrated London News and papers whose names you don't catch, and artists. actual artists, 2 of them, sitting at the settle by the window with sketchbooks, drawing from memory the castle gate, the muffled crowds, roughing out with soft pencils the engravings that will be in 100,000 parlours by the new year. You watch one build the round tower out of nothing in 11 strokes, and it is nearly the finest thing you've seen all week, and you have spent the week in a 15th century chapel, so that is saying something. The talk goes round like the jug. The reporters trade what they have. That every theatre in London is shut, that the stock exchange closed, and the law courts, that the ships in every port in England have their colours half-mast, and foreign ships in London River lowered theirs too, unasked, that in Manchester and Leeds the mills will stop on Monday, mills stopping, hands losing a day's wage, and by every account the hands themselves demanding it. That there was to have been a great review, pantomimes, the season's usual roaring Christmas, and the whole of it has simply been put out like a lamp. 14 days ago, says a long thin reporter with ink on the side of his nose, to the room in general, I filed 800 words saying the prince had a feverish cold and the country need feel no uneasiness. I had it from a source I'd have staked my life on. Feverish cold. He drinks. We none of us knew. That's what I keep coming back to, gentlemen. The bulletin said better, 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 and then Saturday night the big bell of St. Paul's starts up at midnight, and all over London you could hear windows going up, people leaning out into the dark in their nightgowns, asking the street what it was, and the street knew. That's the thing. Nobody had to be told. That bell only means one family, the whole city hanging out of its windows at midnight working it out one house at a time. The room is quiet a moment, fire spitting. And the young one, someone says, the Wales boy? And there it is again. The murmur, the Cambridge story, the mother's heart set hard against her own son, and the thin reporter, to his credit, shuts it down. The boy's 20 and burying his father on Monday. Write that and leave the rest. And the talk moves on. But you've seen how a story travels now, hand to hand like a coin, getting smoother and falser and easier to spend at every exchange. In the corner by the fire, all this while, an old woman sits with a glass of something dark and a basket at her feet, and the basket is full of black rosettes and armbands she's been sewing all week, and she is doing what she has plainly done all evening, selling them, 2pence each, to reporters and travellers going up on Monday, her needle going the whole time she talks, whip, 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 and she says to you, when you buy one because Cutler nudges you, though Bantings will dress you better than twopenny cloth, she says, looking not at you but at her needle. I sewed these for the old king, dearie. William, 37 that was, and for his brother before him, sat in this same corner. Whip, whip. Kings come round like winters. You'll see 2 more, a young thing like you, maybe 3. She bites the thread. The bell rings, and I sew, and the town cries, and then in the spring somebody marries somebody, and I sew white. That's the whole of it, dearie. Black and white, till they sew one for me. She drops the rosette in your palm. It weighs nothing. It is the lightest black thing you have touched all week, and somehow you will keep it, through the journeyman years, through the moves, through a marriage and a shop of your own, in a tin with your indentures, where a granddaughter will find it in another century and ask what it is, and be told, and not really believe it. You walk back up the hill at 9 with porter. Warmth dying in your chest and the cold clamping back down, and at the gate you both stop because from the dark terrace above faint comes music, a single bugler, or perhaps a band rehearsing far off in the quarters, Some fragment of tomorrow's dead marches, 3 bars breaking off again. The sentry stares ahead. The standard hangs still. Cutler blows into his fists. "Come on, Tom," he says. "Long day Monday." And that is Saturday. Fire, ink, rumour, an old woman's needle. 3 bars of a dead march on the freezing air. The great and the small of it, all in one evening, the way it only ever comes at you in life, mixed. Sunday, the last Sunday of Advent, 1 week before Christmas, and every church bell in England rings muffled for morning service, and you go down into the town to St. John's with Cutler because Roe made it plain that Banting's men would be seen at worship, and the church is so full there are men standing in the porch in the cold with their hats off, listening through the open door. The parson is an old man, and he has clearly torn up whatever sermon he had ready for the joy of the season, and what he preaches instead is very short and very quiet, and half the church is weeping before he is 3 minutes in, big slow farm tears, shopkeepers' tears, and you understand something, standing wedged in a pew between Cutler's shoulder and a gamekeeper who smells of dog. This grief in the church is not for the prince, or not only. Most of these people never exchanged a word with him. It is for her, the little woman on the hill. Every wife in this church has imagined this week what it is to be 42 with 9 children, and the light of your life gone out between Saturday dinner and Saturday midnight. Every man has imagined being the one gone, and what would become of everything. The prince's death let all of England, for one black December, grieve every death it had ever had. That is what a public sorrow is for, though nobody would say it so boldly. It is a house big enough for everyone's private dead. Afterwards, in the churchyard, in the crowd's slow shuffle, you hear the talk, and the talk this Sunday is all one thing: she will not be there. Tomorrow, the Queen will not attend the funeral. It is true, and it is not strange, though the modern world will find it strange. Queens and great ladies do not follow coffins in 1861. It is not the custom. Women of rank mourn indoors, and beyond custom there is this: those near her doubt she could stand through it, and are not willing to find out in front of the assembled powers of Europe. Tomorrow, while the guns beat time in the long walk, she will not even be in the castle. She has gone, this very week she goes, with her daughters to Osborne, to the sea, to the house he built for them with his own designs, because he asked her to promise, near the end, that she would go on, and she is trying, in a broken machine sort of way, to obey. The chief mourner tomorrow will be a boy, Bertie, the Prince of Wales, 20 years old. And here the churchyard voices drop still lower because everyone has heard some version of it. That the father, sick as he was, took a train through filthy November weather to Cambridge to talk to that boy about some scrape. A young man's scrape, an actress, the kind of thing half the fathers in this churchyard have marched a son round the garden about, and came home with the chill on him that turned to the fever that killed him. And that the mother believes it. That the Queen, in the first madness of it, has let it be known in her heart, if not in words, who she holds accountable. That boy, she's said to have written to someone, and the sentence everyone repeats, true or garbled, has knives in it. It is monstrously unfair. The typhoid, if typhoid it was, came out of a pipe, not out of a son's foolishness. The man had been ill and grey and sleepless for months before Cambridge. Everyone who reasons knows it. But grief does not reason. Grief looks for a door to blame, because a door can be shut, and the drains cannot. Tomorrow that 20-year-old boy will walk behind his father's coffin as chief mourner before the crowned heads representatives of Europe. carrying besides the ordinary unbearable weight of it, the knowledge of what his own mother believes. Watch him tomorrow, you tell yourself. Whatever else you watch, watch him. The afternoon is rehearsal. Yes, rehearsal. You had not known death was rehearsed, but of course it is. Everything that must not go wrong is rehearsed. The Lord Chamberlain's men pacing the chapel with lists, the 10 bearers, sergeant majors of the guards, huge men in stockinged feet learning the choir steps with a weighted trial coffin of plain deal loaded with sandbags to the exact poundage, because you do not discover a stumble on the day, and you stand at the head of the choir steps where Rose stations you and you talk those enormous soldiers down the incline of black bays inch by inch. The 3rd step's shallow, Sergeant. It'll come sooner than your foot believes. And they listen to you, boy that you are, because you are the man who knows the stairs, and the sandbagged box swims down and settles on the catafalque true as a compliment, and the Lord Chamberlain's man makes a small tick in a small book, and that tick is you. That tick is your whole week. And then the light goes early, the way it does 4 days before the shortest day, and the chapel empties, and you are nearly the last, gathering tools by candle, and you stop, because from the choir there is a sound, the organ. Someone at the organ, very softly. No bellows, boys, pumping full wind, just a whisper of it, a chorale. German, you don't know then what you learn after, that the prince wrote music himself, real music, chorales that will be sung at the funeral tomorrow, that the man designed farms and ran governments, and composed his own hymns as if one life were 3. And you stand in the dark nave of that enormous ship of stone with your candle, under the banners, over the buried kings, and let it come down on you like slow snow. Tomorrow they bury him. Tonight, for a few minutes, the building itself seems to be practicing its grief. You're so tired that the tiredness has become a place, a country you live in now. Your hands throb at the nail corners with a heartbeat of their own. Your shoulders carry 2 ghost lines where yesterday's weight pressed. You're 19, and 11 days ago you were a boy folding cloth, and whatever you are now hasn't got its name yet. You blow the candle out at the door, because the verger trusts you to now. Outside it is freezing hard, the stars savage over the round tower, the standard a black flag on a black sky, one window high on the north front showing a light where a woman who is not there any more in any of the ways that matter kept the lamps burning and the great bell tolls, and you cross the ward to your stone room, and Cutler is awake in the dark for once flat on his back. "Big day," Cutler says to the ceiling. "Big day, you say." A long silence. Then Cutler, who has spoken 40 sentences in 7 days, spends several of his remaining store all at once. "My old dad put men in the ground for 30 years. Village carpenter. Coffins in the back shop. Cradles in the front, he used to say, and the same elm for both if you weren't fussy." The bed creaks. "He told me once, the day it means nothing, leave the trade. And the day it means so much you can't lift your end, leave the trade." A boot thumps to the floor at last after 7 days. The second boot. In between's where the work is. "Good night, Tom." It is the first time all week anyone in this castle has called you Tom. "Good night," you say, and the bell tolls, and somewhere between one toll and the next, sleep takes you like a trapdoor, but sleep gives you back once that night before it keeps you. Some hour past midnight there is a hand on your shoulder, and it is one of the chapel vergers with a shaded lantern. whispering that Mr. Rose compliments, and would you come, there being a question about a hanging at the West End that must be answered before morning, and cannot be answered by anyone who did not hang it. So you dress in the dark in 90 seconds, a skill you now have forever, and cross the lower ward under a sky of hard stars, and the verger unlocks the small door in the great door, and you step for the second time in your life into St. George's Chapel at night. And you stop dead, because you had not understood there would be a vigil. The coffin lies where you piloted it, high on its trestled resting place before tomorrow's ceremonies, and around it, at the four corners, stand 4 soldiers of the guards, motionless, heads bowed over reversed arms, the rifle turned muzzle down, hands folded on the butt, the oldest gesture of military mourning there is, older than muskets, older than England maybe, and candles burn at the 4 corners in tall silver, and that is all the light there is. 4 candles, 4 giants, 1 crimson shape, and above them the whole black-hung choir going up and up into a darkness, where you know, though you cannot see them, the banners of 600 years hang dead still. They change the watch while you're working. You hear it rather than see it. A door, 4 sets of footsteps timed to a single slow beat, low words no louder than pages turning, and the new 4 glide into the places of the old 4 with a precision that is its own kind of tenderness, and the relieved men march slow time away into the dark, and the candles never once waver, and the whole exchange takes 4 minutes, and would break your heart if you let it, so you don't. You hold your lantern for the verger, and you answer the question about the hanging. A cleat, it wanted, nothing more. 30 seconds of work after a mile of cold walking, which is also the trade. And then you should go. You don't go. The verger, who is old and understands nights better than days, makes no move either. The 2 of you stand at the back of the nave in the dark, unofficial, unrecorded, and keep perhaps a quarter of an hour of that vigil that no history will ever list you in. And standing there, you find you are thinking not about princes at all. You are thinking about your father, who is alive, thank God, and mending wagon wheels in Suffolk this minute, or asleep beside your mother, and about how he took your hands once when you were 12, before the indentures, and turned them over as if reading them, and said, "They'll do," which is the most he ever said about anything. And you understand, in the candle dark with the 4 giants and the dead prince, the thing this whole week has been trying to teach you sideways, that all of it, the crape, the guns, the archbishops, the lead, the gold, all of it is only the great world's way of doing what your father does when a neighbour dies, which is to stop work and wash and walk over and stand in the room. That is all any of it is, standing in the room. Mankind has never thought of anything better, because there is nothing better to think of. The verger touches your sleeve. You go out through the small door in the great door. The stars have tilted. The sentry at the gate is a different sentry. Cutler doesn't wake when you come in. The bell tolls. You sleep the last 3 hours of that night deeper than you've slept all week. And if you dream, the dream keeps its own counsel. Monday, the 23rd of December, 1861, comes up iron grey and utterly still. One of those winter days with no wind at all, when smoke rises off the town's chimneys dead straight, like strings holding the sky up, and frost furs every rail and every dead leaf, and sound carries for miles, which matters. Because at first light from far off in the long walk the guns begin. Minute guns. 1 report every 60 seconds, matching the bell. Artillery drawn up in the park, firing blank charge after blank charge. and each one arrives first through your boot soles, a soft thud in the ground, and then through the air, a flat dead boom that rolls off the castle walls and away over the river, and the rooks go up off the home park trees in a ragged shout at the first one, and then, unbelievably, get used to it. Everything gets used to everything. That may be the most frightening fact you learn all week. You're in the chapel by 7 with Roe, in your best black, your neckerchief tied with numb fingers 3 times before it sat true, and you have been given for this one day a black armband of Banting's own supplying, and a place, a real allotted place, marked on the Lord Chamberlain's plan, in the shadows of the south choir aisle, behind a pillar older than the Tudors, where you can be reached in 5 seconds if any hanging fails, any rail gives, anything at all goes wrong with the physical world that you and your kind spent this week building. You are, in other words, exactly what Roe promised. Furniture, but furniture with eyes. And what those eyes see, over the next hours, no engraving will ever get right, and you know it even while it happens. And so you do the thing you've done all week with measurements. You fix things, one at a time, deliberately, and store them. The cold first. St. George's Chapel on a December morning is a cold that comes up through stone into your bones and sits there. Great men will stand in that cold for hours today in silk stockings. Several will be visibly shaken before noon, and everyone will pretend it is grief, and some of it will be. The light, dim, northern, pewter-coloured, so that the hundreds of candles actually matter, each flame standing perfectly still in the windless air, and the black hangings, your hangings, drinking the light so completely that the choir seems to recede as you look at it, a room falling slowly backward into itself. The catafalque waits before the altar steps, and beneath the choir's black floor the opening to the royal vault stands ready. The machinery beneath it oiled and tested. You were there when it was tested, empty, at dawn on Saturday, the platform sinking into the dark smooth as a stone into a pond, and the crank turning with a sound like a great clock being wound backwards. They begin to come in at mid-morning, the mourners, and this is a thing in itself, watching the rulers of the age file past your pillar close enough to touch. Cabinet ministers, grey as the day. Lord Palmerston, the Prime Minister, an old lion moving carefully on gouty feet. Ambassadors and royal representatives, the King of the Belgians' people, Prussians in eagle-fronted helmets carried under their arms, for the dead man's daughter is married into Prussia, and could not come, and his eldest daughter Vicky, who loved him perhaps most fiercely of all the 9, is forbidden by her physicians and her position to travel, and will read of this day in letters, the Knights of the Garter, the household in deepest black, and the Duke of Cambridge, and gentlemen ushers walking backwards with white staves. No congregation of women, almost none. This is 1861, and this is a funeral of state, and the women of that family are at Osborne by the winter sea, and their absence is a presence, if you understand me. The empty places where they are not standing are as loud as anything in the building. Somewhere far above, on the tower, the standard hangs dead in the still air. And then, near noon, the sound outside changes. The guns keep their minute, but under them comes something new. The slow crunch of wheels and hooves on frost-bound gravel, and a band, muffled drums. A drum with a black cloth through its snares makes a sound like a heart heard through a wall. Playing a dead march so slowly it seems the tune itself can barely walk. The procession has left the castle's upper ward. 9 carriages, and then the thing itself, A hearse drawn by horses in black velvet to the ground, plumes nodding, footmen at each wheel, pacing at a rate that turns 200 yards into an age. Inside, 200 men rise and stand without one cough. The west doors open, and the day's grey light falls up the nave in a long cold blade, and the choir begins, "I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord." The opening sentences of the burial service, sung to music by Croft that has buried every sovereign for a century and a half, treble voices rising into that frostwork ceiling like something being released rather than performed. And up the nave, walking at the pace of the drums outside, comes everything you built. The bearers first, your sergeants, enormous, crimson-sashed, and you watch their feet. You cannot help it. You watch their feet at the third shallow step, and their feet are perfect. The coffin rides at their shoulders under a pall of black velvet with a prince's arms, and upon it, as it passes your pillar at a distance of 10 feet, you see what rests on the lid. His hat and his sword. That's all. A man's hat. A man's sword. The two things a gentleman leaves in the hall when he comes home. Somebody in that broken family chose those, and whoever chose them understood everything, because the sight of them undoes men in that chapel whom cannon could not undo. You hear, along the stalls, here and there in the singing dimness, the small strangled sounds of statesmen coming apart quietly inside their collars. And behind the coffin, alone, ahead of all the princes and dukes, walks a boy. The Prince of Wales is 20 and looks this morning about 14. He is pale the way paper is pale, and his eyes are fixed on his father's coffin, and he walks steadily. Give him that forever. Whatever else history says of Bertie, of Edward VII of the racecourses and the dinners. On this day, at this hour, the boy walked steadily, and just behind him, holding the hand of a gentleman, comes a smaller boy in a kilt. Prince Arthur, 11 years old, and the 11-year-old is weeping without hiding it, because he is 11, and no one has yet taught him to, and half the chapel weeps with him because he does it for them all. Your eyes go where Herrick told you they would, to the coffin, and it happens exactly as the old soldier said. Every other soul in this chapel sees a symbol, a state, an age. You see 1/2 ton that 10 men are carrying, and your shoulders remember their 2 ghost lines, and inside the crimson velvet you see the oak you screwed, and inside the oak the dull silver seam that Diggory ran slow for the last foot, and inside the lead the pine you helped lift, and inside the pine a man who once said thank you to you for holding a door. You know the weight of him, not one duke of them all. You carry it accordingly. The service is short as these things go, and you will keep pieces of it always. The Garter King of Arms, proclaiming the styles and titles of the dead into the cold air. Thus it hath pleased Almighty God to take out of this transitory life unto his divine mercy the late most illustrious and most exalted Prince Albert, the words rolling out title after title, and every title now belonging to nobody. One of the prince's own chorales sung over him, his own music, notes he set down with his own living hand rising over his coffin, and you think of the organ whispering in the dark last night, and your skin moves on your arms, and then the moment the whole week has been walking toward. The bearers step forward. The coffin is shifted, with that infinite shuffling care you now know from inside, onto the platform in the choir floor. The choir sings the Nunc Dimittis. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace. And somewhere below your feet, out of sight, a man puts his hands to an oiled crank, and the coffin begins to sink. There is no other movement in the chapel. 200 of the most powerful men alive stand absolutely still, and the guns keep their minute outside, thud, and the bell keeps its minute above. And between those two slow pulses the crimson velvet goes down through the floor of St. George's smoothly, evenly, an inch at a second, the hat and the sword riding it down past the level of the pavement, down past the kings, down into the candle-lit dark of the vault below, and the boy at the graveside, 'cause that is what he is, a boy at a graveside, the rest is upholstery. The boy stands looking down into the opening with his hands at his sides, and just before the coffin passes from the sight of the chapel, his composure fails by exactly one motion. He presses one hand flat over his eyes, once the way you'd press a stamp to wax, and takes it away, and is a prince again. Earth to earth. The Lord Chamberlain breaks his white stave. No, that is for sovereigns. But wands are surrendered, insignia laid up. The heralds do their old strange offices, and a handful of consecrated earth rattles down onto velvet in the vault, with a sound so small and so ordinary, gravel on cloth, that it is the loudest thing you have ever heard. It is done. He is down among the kings in the entrance of the vault, lying, though only the family know this, not for eternity but for a year, a lodger among the Georges, until the granite at Frogmore is ready, and she comes to move him somewhere that is only theirs. The chapel empties with glacial ceremony. The guns cease, and the silence they leave has a hole in it shaped like a gun. The bell tolls on a while, then stops, and the stopping is worse. And you stand behind your pillar, furniture to the last, until the last usher is gone, and Roe comes to find you, and the two of you walk the empty choir together in the candle smoke, checking the hangings, because that is the trade. Someone must do the last things properly. At the open vault, roped now and guarded, Roe pauses, looks down into the dark where the candles glimmer on crimson far below. 21 years old I was, at George the Fourth's, he says. Held a door. That was my whole part. Held a door and shook like a leaf. He straightens a fold of black serge on the rail with 2 fingers. Precisely. Needlessly. You did considerably more than hold a door, Wren. Mr. Banting will hear of it. Now go and eat something, for God's sake. You look like a candle end. And the fact that he has used to the word his master's phrase from a week and a lifetime ago tells you it is a thing the old men say to the young men in this trade, and have always said, and that with those words you have been, in some way no paper will ever record, admitted. You do not go back to London that night, nor the next. There is striking to be done. The trade's word for taking down what you put up, and there is a whole sermon in the fact that the same men must always do both, and so you keep Christmas such as it is in Windsor Castle, such as it is. Christmas Day, 1861, at Windsor is a plate of goose in the servants' hall, eaten in near silence, and a chapel with the black still on it, and no green anywhere, no holly, no bay, none of the garlands this castle was famous for, because it was he, the dead man, who brought the Christmas tree itself into English life. He and the Queen, with their fir trees at Windsor, hung with candles as sugar toys, engraved in the papers in 48, imitated within 10 years in half the parlours of England. Every Christmas tree in every window in Britain this week is his monument, and this year the castle that taught the country the custom cannot bear to keep it. The young prince's presents, they say in the hall, were given quietly, sadly, at Osborne by the sea. The Queen, they say, sat through it like a woman made of ash. You think of your own mother's kitchen in Suffolk. the single string of paper the little ones make, and for one bad minute behind the wood store you're as homesick as a child, 19 years old with split hands that carried a prince, crying 4 or 5 tears into your sleeve where nobody sees, and then you wipe your face and carry in the boards because that is also the trade. The striking takes days. Cloth that went up in terrible urgency comes down slow and orderly, folded, listed, bundled. Black by the wagon load rolls back down the hill to the station, and the chapel comes back out of the dark bay by bay, like a face turning back into the light. The pale stone, the gold, the scarlet banners suddenly loud as trumpets after a week of black, and you find you have to stop. Half up your old ladder in the third bay, and simply look at the colour, the way a man coming out of a sick room stops on the doorstep and looks at the ordinary street. The last piece comes down on the last day of the year, and by some accident of the work, or perhaps not an accident, Geddes has a long memory and a rule in his hand and his own ideas of what is owed. The last piece is in the third bay, and the man sent up the ladder, for it is you. So you climb your old ladder one final time, in an emptying chapel, in the thin light of a December afternoon, and you draw the tacks you drove a fortnight ago. They come out with small dry squeaks, one after another, each one releasing its little pinch of black wool fluff. And you gather the long breadth of superfine as it comes free, armful over armful, the cloth pouring down cold and heavy against your chest, smelling of dye and candle smoke and stone. And when the last corner drops, the bay stands bare, and the pale carved pillar is a pillar again, and low on its flank, where your steadying hand rested through all those freezing hours, there is nothing. You look. You actually look, holding the folded darkness against your chest like an armful of night. Nothing. Scrubbed clean, or never there, or there still, under the light, the way the marks of all the other men are there, unfindable, permanent. Both, you decide. A mark can be both. Geddes is waiting at the ladder foot with his rule and his strangled almost smile. That's the chapel zone again, he says, taking one end of the fold. Wool over the arm, laddie, not over the shoulder. You're a tradesman, not a Roman, and the two of you carry the last of the great darkness of 1861 down the nave together, over Henry VIII, and out the south door, folding as you go, corner to corner, corner to corner. The old rhythm until what covered a king's chapel is a neat dense square no bigger than a Bible, and Geddes sets it on the barrow on top of the rest, and that is the end of the black. Behind you, through the open door, the evening sun comes level through the west windows and lights the whole restored choir at once. Stone the colour of honey, banners burning scarlet and gold, the brass eagle blazing, as if the building had merely closed its eyes for a fortnight and now opened them. "Aye," says Geddes quietly, following your look. "It's seen worse, yon kirk. Plague years. Cromwell's men stabling horses in it. It grieves, and then it stands up again. Buildings and folk." He turns the barrow. "New Year tomorrow, Wren. 62. Wheel it down and we'll call the account square. You wheel it down the hill in the last light of the old year, the barrow's iron rim ringing on the frozen cobbles, and every soul you pass touches his hat. Not to you, you understand, to the barrow, to what the folded black had been near, and you find you are steering it the way you steered something else, with care around the turns, not letting it touch, and you think, this is the trade now. This is yours. Last things, done properly, all the way to the bottom of the hill. The world outside is doing the same in its slower way. The shops of Windsor take their shutters down. The muffles come off the bells at last, and the first unmuffled peal you hear, Tuesday of the New Year, from the parish tower, some ordinary wedding or practice, is so bright and so alive it is nearly indecent, and everyone in the street pauses, and then everyone goes on because everything gets used to everything. But do not let anyone tell you the world went back. It did not go back. You will spend the next 40 years of your life watching what this December did. The Queen does not come back. That is the plain truth of the reign's next decade. She wears black from this month to her coffin, 40 more years of it. She withdraws from London, from ceremony, from sight. The papers begin gently, then not gently to complain. There will be years when men openly ask what a queen is for who is never seen, and pamphlets and mutterings of republics. Every letter she writes for years goes out on paper edged in black an inch deep. Every household form is kept as he fixed it. His rooms, as you know better than most, stand ready each evening, hot water steaming faintly at a dead man's washstand while the sentry turns modern outside the drawn curtains, and the country, which cannot embrace her, embraces his ghost instead. Memorials go up as if England had struck a spring of them. Statues, obelisks, drinking fountains, 100 Albert Streets and Albert Squares and Albert Halls. The great gilded shrine rising in Kensington through the 60s, with the prince seated golden under a spire, holding, this is the detail to keep, not a sword, not a sceptre, but a book, the catalogue of his great exhibition. A man memorialised holding a catalogue. He would have half liked it and half winced by everything you ever heard of him. And the black spreads down through the whole society like dye through water. The Queen mourns, so the court mourns, so the gentry mourn. So everyone with a shilling for crape mourns as the court does, and the great machinery of Victorian mourning, the etiquette books, the mourning warehouses, the jet brooches with a curl of the dead's hair under glass, widows in weeds by strict timetable, first year deepest black, second year trimmings. All of it, already growing before, now sets hard, fixed by her example, for a generation. You're in the death trade. Your order books tell the story better than any historian will. Grief has fashions, and this December set the fashion for 40 years. As for you, the seasons take you the way seasons do. You go back to St. James's Street in the first week of January on a slow, cold train, and the workshop smells exactly as it always smelled, glue and shavings and dye, and it is a week before your hands stop expecting the bell every 60 seconds. The splits at your nail corners heal by Candlemas, leaving nothing. Diggory was right. The arms forget in a week. The weight in the room stays. Mr. Banting, the elder himself, comes down to the bench one morning, looks over your work without a word for a long time, and says, Mr. Rowe spoke for you, which in the economy of that house is a knighthood. Your indentures have 2 years yet to run. You serve them. You become a journeyman, then in time a foreman, and later, much later, when the firm serves at other funerals, and it will. Banting's will bury the Duke of Wellington's generation, and then the Queen's own, and in 1901 men of that same house will do at Windsor for her what was done for him, closing the circle you stood inside of. Younger men will notice that the old foreman checks every doorway on every route, himself, always, with his own brass-tipped rule, and they will think it fussiness, and you will let them. You go back to Windsor twice in your life. Once in 1871, 10 years on, a delivery to the deanery, and you walk out on a spring evening across the home park to Frogmore, and there it is, finished. The mausoleum, cruciform, granite and copper, cedars planted round it, and through the gates in the evening light a doorway of such colour within, marble and gold painted heaven all over the ceiling in the manner of Raphael, the painter he loved best, that it looks less like a tomb than like a jewel box built by somebody who could not stop. Which is what it is. She visits constantly, the gardeners tell you. Anniversaries, ordinary days, brings the children, brings the grandchildren, takes important decisions there, sitting with them. Above the entrance, they tell you, are carved words she chose. Farewell, beloved. Here at last I shall rest with thee. With thee in Christ I shall rise again. You stand at the railing a long time, an ordinary tradesman with his hat in his hands in the middle of an empty park, and you find that the 10 years have done what Herrick promised. You have stopped wanting to forget. And once more, one more time, an old man yourself, in a February at the very beginning of the new century, in a vast crowd under a cold sun, watching a gun carriage go up the hill to the castle, with a small coffin on it, under a white pall and a crown, the whole empire in black one last time in the old style, and the little coffin goes where you know it is going, out to the granite and the gold ceiling and the 2 stone figures side by side, and a young man next to you in the crush, a clerk by his collar, says to nobody, 40 years she waited, and you say, yes, and he looks at you, at whatever is in your face, and asks, did you ever see him? The prince? And you consider the whole long answer. The workshop at 4 in the morning, the black wagon through Piccadilly, the ice in the basin, the ladder in the 3rd bay, the blinded mirrors, the little woman carrying a portrait down a corridor, the hiss of solder, the weight coming onto your arms, the hat and the sword, the boy pressing his hand to his eyes, the coffin sinking through the floor at an inch a second while the guns kept the minute. Once, you say, he held still while I held a door, and the crowd moves and takes you both with it, and that is the last of it, and it is enough. But that is all far ahead, and this is history for sleep, and we do not end our nights in crowds or in new centuries. We end them where sleep is. So leave the old man in the February crush of 1901 and come back with me now. Back down the years, back through the black-edged decades, back to where we belong tonight, to the night of Monday, the 23rd of December, 1861, the night after. Come back to the castle on its chalk hill. It is late. The mourners are gone. The special trains have carried the ministers and the ambassadors and the ink-fingered reporters back down the frozen line to London. Carriage windows lit and sliding away into the dark like a string of lanterns pulled off a table. The guns in the long walk are limbered and gone. The gravel is scarred where their wheels stood, and by morning the frost will have healed even that. The great bell has stopped. After 9 days it has stopped, and the silence it leaves behind is enormous and strange, like the silence after a clock is taken out of a room where it ticked your whole life, the wall still holding the shape of the sound. You are Thomas Wren, and you are 19 years old, and you're lying on a straw palliasse in a stone room in the lower ward of Windsor Castle with your boots off at last for the first time in a week, and the pure animal relief of your own stockinged feet free under the blanket is so complete it is very nearly shameful. And Cutler is already asleep across the dark, breathing like a slow tide, and the work is done. The work is done. Say it again, because your body doesn't believe it yet. Your hands don't believe it. They lie on the blanket, still faintly humming, the way hands do after days of tools, still expecting the needle, the tack hammer, the screw. Your fingertips are ridged with healing splits that catch on the wool when you move. Your shoulders carry their two fading lines. Your knees know every hour they spent on stone. This is the tiredness that lives past the far side of tiredness, the kind that stops being a burden and becomes a warmth, a heaviness poured into you like sand into a jar, filling the arms, filling the legs, pressing you down into the mattress so gently and so completely that the mattress seems to be rising around you. Let it. Above you, up through the floors and the centuries of stone, the castle is settling for the night. 600 rooms exhaling, fires banked, lamps going out one corridor at a time. The footmen released at last from their week of standing turned to marble. The kitchen maid who buttered bread through her tears asleep by now under the roof slates, her hands finally still. Down in the town, the taproom fire is dying to a red heap. The old woman's needle is at rest in the basket of black rosettes. The artist's sketchbooks are closed on their pencil towers. Out along the dark river the water goes on doing the only thing it knows, sliding seaward past Eton and the white meadows, the same water road it was for the conqueror's boats. And in the home park the cedars stand over Frogmore in the starlight, keeping this secret that they do not yet know they keep. And in the chapel, in your chapel, because it is yours now, a little, forever, the way a building belongs to everyone whose hands have hurt for it, the candles burn on at the four corners of the vault, and the guard keeps its vigil over a closed square of floor, four bowed giants and the buried kings and the one new lodger down among them, resting at last, a man who never once in 20 years learned how to rest, resting now. You did that. You and Diggory's slow last foot of solder, and Rowe's exactness, and Geddes' rule, and Cutler's silence, and 80 nameless others. Some man had to do the last things, and it fell to you, and you did them properly, and the world can bear itself another day. That's enough. Do you hear it, down all these years? That is enough. Your eyes are closed now. When did you close them? You can't remember, and it doesn't matter. The darkness behind your lids is soft and grainy, and thoughts are coming looser now, unhooked from each other, drifting past like the barges you watched from the tower, the jackdaws lifting all at once off the parapet, the 11 strokes that made a tower on paper. Thank you to you for holding a door. Your mother hearing the same muffled bell over the winter fields, the hat and the sword, the third step, shallow, coming sooner than your foot believes. Let them drift. Tomorrow there will be striking ladders, folded cloth by the wagon load. Tomorrow there will be bread and dripping in the grey before dawn, and Geddes with his rule, and the long careful undoing of everything you did. Tomorrow and the day after, and all the working days stretching out ahead of you like the long walk stretching to its far horse on its far hill. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this room, this blanket, this heaviness, this dark. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof of 900-year-old stone over your head, and a trade in your hands, and a master who spoke for you, and a mother in Suffolk who will get a letter next week that says, in your careful apprentice copper plate, that you were at Windsor and were well, and saw great things, and not one word more, as agreed, ever. And she will read it out twice by the fire, and keep it in the tea-caddy till she dies. That's more than most souls in this hard world have tonight. That's enough. Centuries will pass. The castle you're sleeping in will still be standing. That's the strange comfort of stone. The round tower will still hold up its flag over the river. The chapel will still lift its frostwork ceiling over the buried kings. And the little boy who wept in his kilt will grow old and be buried, and his brother, the steady walking boy, will reign and dine and be forgiven by everyone except perhaps himself, and be buried too. And the small woman in black will keep her 40 years of faith, with a jewel box of gold and granite under the cedars, and go into it at last, and the world will call the whole long age by her name. The gas lamps you never saw lit will give way to lights no one in 1861 could dream, and the trains will run without steam, and the drains will be mended everywhere, and children will stop dying of the water they drink, which is the true monument, better than all the gilded spires, though no one'll ever hold a procession for a pipe, and people will still lie awake in the dark in December, still lose the ones they cannot lose, still cover mirrors in some houses without remembering why, still stop work and wash and walk over and stand in the room, because mankind has never thought of anything better, because there is nothing better to think of. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The weight of a long day and the deep sweet sinking at the end of it, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Thomas Wren in his stone room under the round tower 160 winters ago. Boots off at last. Let the castle fade. Let the candles burn without you. Let the bell stay silent. Let your hands stop their humming. Let your shoulders give up their lines. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. The work is done. Whatever your version of it was today, whatever you carried, whatever you measured, whatever doors you held, the work is done and the night watch is set, and none of it needs you till morning. You've earned this rest. Take it and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.